Doctors stunned when pregnant woman delivers a giant spider. How did this happen? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The air in the hospital room was thick with anticipation. Dr. Elena Murray, a veteran obstetrician, had seen countless deliveries over her 20 years in the field. Yet this one felt different. Something about the case of Maria Bennett, a 34-year-old pregnant woman who had been under her care for months, gnawed at her instincts. Maria had been rushed to the hospital 2 weeks early due to severe abdominal pain, but what alarmed Elena the most were the test results that defied logic. The fetus was larger than expected, far larger, and the scans were perplexing. Where human anatomy should have been, there were distorted shapes, skeletal structures that resembled nothing she'd ever seen. Her colleagues had joked nervously, "Looks like you've got a Guinness World Record case here." But there was no humor in Elena's heart as she prepared to enter the delivery room. Maria, pale and drenched in sweat, lay on the hospital bed, her breathing uneven. Her husband, Tom, stood by her side, gripping her hand tightly. The normally robust man now appeared gaunt, his face etched with worry. "Is she going to be okay?" he asked, his voice trembling. He glanced at the doctors around the room, searching for reassurance. "We're doing everything we can," Elena replied, forcing a calm tone into her voice. The truth was, she had no idea what was about to happen. Every test, every scan, every bit of conventional medical knowledge had failed to prepare her for this. The nurses moved swiftly, checking IVs, adjusting equipment, and preparing for what they assumed would be a complicated cesarean section. The tension in the room was palpable. Outside, in the hallway, hospital staff whispered among themselves. Word of Maria's case had spread, and the mystery of her condition had drawn a small crowd of curious onlookers, including medical interns and seasoned physicians who hoped to witness the bizarre delivery. Maria winced and let out a guttural scream as another contraction gripped her. It hurts so much," she sobbed, clutching Tom's hand as if her life depended on it. Tom leaned closer, whispering words of encouragement, though his own voice cracked with fear. Elena stepped closer to the bed. "Maria, we're here with you. I need you to stay as calm as possible. We're going to bring your baby into the world safely, I promise." But even as she spoke, doubts crept into her mind. Was it a baby? Could she even call it that? The anesthesiologist leaned in to administer an epidural. "We'll start the procedure shortly," he said, his tone professional but clipped. Elena nodded and signaled for the surgical team to get ready. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the beeping of monitors and Maria's labored breathing. As the minutes dragged on, Maria's pain seemed to intensify. She thrashed on the bed, her cries growing louder. The epidural didn't seem to take effect, which was itself an anomaly. "Something's wrong," she gasped. It's moving too much." Elena exchanged a worried glance with Dr. Carter, the attending surgeon. "We need to move now," she said firmly. "Prep for an emergency cesarean." But before they could proceed, Maria let out an ear-piercing scream. The monitors began to beep erratically as her vitals spiked. "It's coming," she cried, her hands clawing at the sheets. "I can feel it, it's coming now." Elena hesitated for a split second before springing into action. "Everyone, positions. We're delivering this baby naturally," she commanded. The team scrambled to comply, adrenaline surging through their veins. The room buzzed with frantic energy as they prepared for the unexpected. Maria's screams reached a fever pitch, and then, in a moment that seemed to stretch for an eternity, the room was plunged into a stunned silence. Emerging from Maria was not the squirming, crying infant they had anticipated. Instead, what they saw defied every law of nature and science. A massive, spindly leg, covered in glistening black hair, pushed its way into the open air. The room erupted into chaos. "Oh my God," a nurse whispered, backing away, her hand flying to her mouth. "What is that?" another exclaimed, dropping a tray of instruments with a deafening clang. Tom, frozen in shock, could only stare as more of the creature emerged. Its bulbous body glistened under the harsh hospital lights, its multiple eyes reflecting the terrified faces around it. Fangs, sharp and dripping with some kind of fluid, clicked menacingly as the creature let out a high-pitched screech that sent chills down everyone's spine. Elena's heart raced as she fought to maintain her composure. "Everyone, stay calm," she shouted, though her voice betrayed her own terror. "Do not panic." The creature, undeniably a giant spider, continued to crawl free of Maria's body, its grotesque form writhing as it adjusted to its new environment. Maria, pale and drenched in sweat, had fallen unconscious, her body unable to endure the trauma. Tom finally found his voice. "What is that thing?" he screamed, backing away from the bed. "What's happening to my wife?" Elena had no answers. Her training, her years of experience, everything she knew as a doctor was rendered useless in the face of this abomination. All she could do was act on instinct. "Get the sedatives," she ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Now." A nurse hesitated before rushing to comply, retrieving a syringe filled with a powerful tranquilizer. But before anyone could administer it, the spider let out another screech and lunged toward the nearest nurse. Pandemonium ensued as people screamed and scrambled to escape its path. Elena grabbed a scalpel from the tray and held it in front of her like a weapon. Her hands trembled, but her determination was unwavering. "No one move," she commanded. "It's scared and disoriented. If we panic, it will only get worse." The spider paused, its multiple eyes locking onto her. For a moment, it seemed to assess her, as if deciding whether she was a threat. The tension in the room was suffocating, every second stretching into an eternity. Finally, the creature scuttled toward a corner of the room, its massive legs clicking against the tiled floor. It curled into itself, trembling as if in fear. The room fell silent once more, save for the labored breathing of the staff and the steady beeping of the monitors. Elena lowered the scalpel, her mind racing. "We need containment," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Call security and quarantine this room. No one leaves and no one enters." A young intern, pale and visibly shaken, nodded and rushed to make the call. The rest of the team stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the creature that defied all logic and understanding. Tom approached Maria, his hands trembling as he brushed her hair away from her face. "Maria," he whispered, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Please wake up. Please be okay." Elena placed a hand on his shoulder. "She's stable for now," she said softly. "But we need to figure out what's happening here." As the minutes ticked by, the initial shock began to wear off, replaced by a grim determination to understand the impossible. The hospital staff, seasoned professionals who had seen their share of miracles and tragedies, now faced a new challenge, the birth of a creature that should not exist. And as they prepared to confront the unknown, one question lingered in the back of everyone's mind. What would happen next? The room remained frozen in a surreal limbo. Nurses clung to the walls, doctors exchanged wide-eyed glances, and the grotesque spider-like creature huddled in the corner, its legs twitching as though adjusting to its alien surroundings. The sterile air of the hospital now carried an undeniable tension, thick and heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Dr. Elena Murray, still clutching the scalpel, took a step forward, her shoes squeaking against the tile floor. She wasn't sure what possessed her to approach the creature, curiosity, courage, or sheer desperation, but she knew that waiting for security was no longer an option. The creature's trembling suggested fear, but its fangs, glistening and ready, made it clear it wouldn't hesitate to defend itself. "Elena," Dr. Carter whispered hoarsely, grabbing her arm. "What are you doing? You can't get close to that thing. It's dangerous." She turned to him, her jaw tight. "We don't know what it is or what it wants. Panicking won't solve anything. If we can understand it, maybe we can control the situation." Her voice was steady, but her heart was pounding so hard it felt as though it might burst from her chest. She crouched slightly, lowering her height, and held out her hand, not close enough to provoke it, but enough to show she meant no harm. "It's okay," she murmured, her tone soft and soothing. "You're scared. We're scared too." The creature shifted, its multiple eyes reflecting the fluorescent light. It clicked its fangs, a sound that sent chills down everyone's spines. But it didn't move. Meanwhile, Maria remained unconscious on the bed, her husband Tom kneeling beside her. He kept one hand on her forehead, whispering reassurances she couldn't hear, while his other hand clutched the bed rail so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Elena, this is madness," Carter hissed. "We need animal control, not a medical team." "This isn't an animal," Elena replied without looking back. "It came from her. It's connected to her somehow." She gestured toward Maria's pale, motionless form. "We can't treat this like a wild animal. There's something more going on here." Before Carter could respond, the door burst open, and 2 security guards stepped in, armed with tranquilizer rifles. Their boots clonked loudly against the floor, breaking the tenuous calm. The creature recoiled instantly, its legs spreading wide in a threatening posture. "Stop!" Elena barked, raising a hand. "Don't shoot!" One of the guards, a burly man with a crew cut, narrowed his eyes at her. "Doctor, this thing is a threat. We can't just let it stay here." "It's not attacking anyone right now," she argued. "If you fire, you could agitate it and make things worse. We need to understand it first." The guard hesitated, glancing at his partner. The second guard, a younger man who looked just as terrified as the medical staff, lowered his weapon slightly. "Maybe the doc's right," he muttered. "It's not doing anything." The older guard scowled but didn't pull the trigger. As the standoff continued, Maria began to stir. Her eyelids fluttered open, and she let out a weak moan. "Tom?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm here," Tom said quickly, leaning closer. "I'm right here, Maria." Her eyes moved sluggishly around the room, finally landing on Elena. Is it over?" she asked. Elena hesitated. "Maria, the baby." "Different. But you're okay. You're stable." Maria's brow furrowed as she struggled to process the words. "Different," she repeated. Her gaze drifted toward the corner of the room, where the creature now crouched, its body pulsating faintly. Her breath caught in her throat. "What is that?" Tom tightened his grip on her hand. "It came out of you, Maria," he said, his voice shaking. "I don't know how, but it did." Maria's face twisted in a mix of fear and confusion. That's not possible," she stammered. "It's not, it can't be mine." "It is," Elena said gently. "Maria, I know this is hard to believe, but we've been monitoring your pregnancy for months. We knew something was unusual, but we never imagined." Tears welled up in Maria's eyes. "What's happening to me?" she whispered. Before Elena could answer, the creature let out a low, rumbling sound, almost like a growl. The guards raised their rifles again, but Elena stepped in front of them. "I said don't shoot," she snapped. The creature's eyes flicked between Maria and Elena. Then, slowly it began to move. The room tensed as it crawled toward the bed, its movements deliberate but not aggressive. Tom pulled Maria closer, shielding her as best he could, but Elena held up a hand to stop him. "Wait," she said. "It's not attacking. Look at it, it's curious." The creature stopped at the edge of the bed and extended one of its legs, brushing it lightly against Maria's arm. She flinched but didn't pull away. The touch was gentle, almost hesitant, as if it were seeking reassurance. Maria stared at the creature, her fear mingling with an inexplicable sense of recognition. It's not hurting me," she said softly. "It doesn't want to hurt me." Elena watched the interaction closely, her mind racing. "Maria, I think it recognizes you," she said. "It came from you. Maybe it sees you as its mother." The words hung in the air, absurd and impossible, yet somehow fitting. Maria reached out a trembling hand, her fingers brushing against the creature's glossy carapace. It let out a soft chittering sound, pressing closer to her. Tom's jaw dropped. "What the hell is going on?" he muttered. Elena turned to the guards. "Stand down," she ordered. "It's not a threat, not to her at least." Reluctantly, the guards lowered their weapons. The younger one muttered, "This is the craziest thing I've ever seen." As the creature nestled closer to Maria, the tension in the room began to ease. But questions remained, questions no one had answers to. What was this creature? How had it come to be? And most importantly, what would happen next? Elena knew they couldn't keep this contained for long. The world would demand answers, and they would have to face the unimaginable truth. For now, though, all they could do was wait and watch as a bond formed between a mother and the most extraordinary child she could have ever imagined. The room settled into an uneasy calm, but the questions swirling in everyone's minds threatened to shatter it at any moment. Maria's hand remained on the creature's carapace, her fingers trembling but steady enough to show some strange, maternal instinct had taken hold. The creature's body pulsed faintly, almost as though it were breathing in sync with hers. It seemed to relax, curling its spindly legs closer to its body. Dr. Elena Murray's head was spinning. She had been a physician for over 15 years, seen her share of high-risk pregnancies, rare complications, and unimaginable outcomes, but this defied all scientific reasoning. The tension in the room was matched only by her racing thoughts. What were they even dealing with? What would happen if this story left the confines of the hospital? Maria, Elena began carefully, crouching beside the bed so that she could speak to her patient at eye level. We need to know, did you ever experience anything unusual during your pregnancy? Any incidents? Contact with something out of the ordinary? Maria shook her head weakly. No, nothing. It was a normal pregnancy at first. Just nausea. The usual. Her gaze flicked to the creature, which now emitted a faint clicking noise that reverberated through the room. This doesn't make any sense. It's impossible. Elena pressed on. Did you travel anywhere unusual? Try any experimental treatments? Even something you might not have thought was significant? Maria frowned, her brow knitting in concentration. Tom and we went camping about 8 months ago. It was just a weekend trip in the mountains. Nothing happened, at least, nothing I thought was important. Tom's eyes widened. Wait, there was that bite? Maria looked at him sharply. What bite? You remember, he said, his voice hurried. When we were hiking by the stream. You thought it was a mosquito at first, but there was that weird swelling on your leg. It went away after a couple of days. Elena's mind raced. A bite? That could explain something, maybe. Do you remember what bit you? She asked. Maria shook her head. No, I barely even noticed it. It didn't hurt much. Elena stood up and turned to the team. We need a full toxicology report. And someone call the CDC. We need to know if there's any precedent for something like this. The older security guard stepped forward, his expression grim. You're planning to involve the government? You realize once they find out about this thing, they'll lock it and her away in some lab. Elena's jaw tightened. She hadn't considered the full implications, but the guard was right. The moment word of this creature reached any higher authority, Maria and her child would be reduced to specimens, studied and prodded for the rest of their lives. Tom stood abruptly, his protective instincts flaring. No way, he said firmly. No one's taking Maria anywhere. Or that thing, whatever it is. Tom, Elena said gently, we have to think about everyone's safety. We don't know what we're dealing with. This could be a public health emergency. He glared at her. It hasn't hurt anyone. It's not a monster. It's not a monster, Maria echoed softly, her voice laced with uncertainty. She looked at the creature, her fingers tracing one of its spindly legs. That's mine. I don't know how, but it's mine. The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. Even the creature seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, its clicking quieting to a faint hum. Dr. Carter, who had been standing in stunned silence, finally spoke up. Elena, we need to run some tests. Blood work, imaging, anything to figure out what this thing is. We can't just sit here and hope for answers to fall into our laps. Elena nodded reluctantly. You're right. Maria, we're going to take some samples, just to figure out what's going on. We'll be as gentle as we can. Maria hesitated but eventually nodded. But just don't hurt it. The team moved cautiously, bringing in equipment while keeping a wary eye on the creature. When a nurse approached with a needle, the creature tensed, its legs extending in a defensive posture. Maria immediately placed her hand on its back, murmuring soothing words. It's okay. They're not going to hurt you. Amazingly, the creature seemed to understand. It relaxed slightly, allowing the nurse to draw a small sample of its blood, or at least what passed for blood. The fluid was a deep, iridescent green, unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Elena stared at the vial, her scientific curiosity warring with her unease. "Send this to the lab immediately," she instructed. "We need answers, fast." As the sample was rushed out of the room, Maria leaned back against her pillow, exhaustion overtaking her. "What happens now?" she asked. Elena didn't have an answer. For now, all they could do was wait and hope that the truth, whatever it was, wouldn't bring more chaos than they could handle. As the hours ticked by, the hospital buzzed with a mix of hushed speculation and frantic activity. Word of Maria's extraordinary delivery had spread among the staff despite the tight lockdown, and whispers of the spider baby echoed in hallways and break rooms. Yet no one dared to enter the maternity wing unless absolutely necessary. Inside the room, Maria sat up in her bed, holding a cup of tea with trembling hands. The creature rested at her side on the bed, its movements eerily calm as though it sensed Maria's unease. Tom hovered protectively nearby, his arms crossed and his jaw clenched, shooting distrustful glances at anyone who entered. Dr. Elena Murray returned with a grim expression, a folder of preliminary lab results in her hand. She paused at the doorway, exchanging a look with Tom before stepping inside. "I have some updates," she began, her voice low but steady. Maria sat forward, clutching her tea. "What did you find?" Elena hesitated, glancing at the creature before answering. "The blood sample we took, it's unlike anything we've ever seen. It doesn't match any known species. The cellular structure is alien. It doesn't conform to normal biological rules." "Alien?" Tom repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Are you saying it's from another planet?" "I'm not saying that," Elena replied cautiously. "But it's not something we've encountered before, at least not in any documented way." Maria's face paled. "What does that mean for me? Am I infected with something?" Elena placed a reassuring hand on Maria's arm. "We didn't find any signs of infection or illness in your blood work. In fact, you seem to be in remarkably good health. Whatever this is, it doesn't appear to have harmed you physically." Maria exhaled shakily, but the relief was short-lived. "What about it?" she asked, nodding toward the creature. "Is it dangerous?" Elena sighed. "That's what we're trying to determine. Right now, it seems docile, but we can't predict its behavior long-term. Its rapid development, being born fully formed, is highly unusual even for the most extreme cases of parthenogenesis or mutation." Tom stepped closer, his protective instincts flaring. "You're not planning to take it away, are you?" Elena hesitated. "Tom, you have to understand, this isn't just a personal matter anymore. There are scientific and ethical implications here. We need to study it, understand what it is and where it came from." Maria's voice hardened. "You're not taking it. It's mine." The creature clicked softly, almost as though responding to her words. Its segmented body shifted, and one of its legs gently tapped Maria's arm. The gesture was strangely affectionate, sending a shiver down Elena's spine. Before Elena could respond, the door burst open, and a man in a black suit strode in, flanked by two equally imposing figures. He flashed a badge with the unmistakable logo of a federal agency. "I'm Agent Nolan," he announced curtly. "This situation is now under government jurisdiction." Tom bristled. "You can't just barge in here and take over." Agent Nolan's cold gaze landed on Tom. "We can and we will. This creature represents an unprecedented biological anomaly and potential threat. It's our duty to contain and assess it." Maria clutched the creature protectively, her eyes wide with fear. "No, you can't take it." Nolan ignored her protests and signaled to his team. "Secure the specimen." The agents advanced, but the creature reacted instantly. Its legs unfolded in a defensive posture, and a low, menacing hiss filled the room. The air seemed to crackle with tension as the agents froze, their hands hovering over their weapons. "Stand down," Elena snapped, stepping between the agents and Maria. "You're making a mistake. If you agitate it, you could provoke a dangerous reaction." Nolan's jaw tightened. "Doctor, this is a national security matter. Step aside." "No," Elena said firmly. "This is a medical and ethical issue, and Maria is still my patient. You can't just treat her and her child, whatever it is, like lab specimens. Tom joined Elena, his stance defiant. You're not taking her or the baby. The creature's hissing grew louder, its body tensing as though ready to strike. The agents hesitated, clearly uneasy about provoking it further. Nolan held up a hand, signaling his team to stop. He turned to Elena with a calculating look. You have 24 hours to conduct your tests and provide us with a full report. After that, we're taking custody of the specimen. Understood? Elena nodded reluctantly, knowing she had no choice. As Nolan and his team left, she turned to Maria and Tom. We need to work fast. If we can prove it's not a threat, we might be able to convince them to leave you alone. Maria nodded, tears streaming down her face. Please, just don't let them take it away. Elena placed a reassuring hand on Maria's shoulder. We'll do everything we can. As the door closed, the room fell silent again, save for the creature's soft clicking noises. Maria held it close, her resolve hardening. Whatever this thing was, it was hers, and she would protect it at all costs. The next 24 hours were a whirlwind of activity, tension, and emotional turmoil. Maria refused to sleep, staying awake with the creature, whom she had started to call Eris after a name that came to her in a dream. The name felt right, as though it belonged to the creature all along. Despite its alien nature, Eris showed no signs of aggression toward Maria or Tom, behaving with an almost childlike curiosity. It clicked and chirped softly, observing the room with its multiple gleaming eyes, occasionally reaching out to gently touch Maria's arm with a leg. Dr. Elena Murray worked tirelessly, assembling a small, trusted team to conduct tests. Samples were taken cautiously, each one providing more questions than answers. Eris's cellular structure defied traditional biology, resembling a blend of arthropod and mammalian traits. Its body temperature remained constant despite its cold-blooded appearance, and its eyes showed signs of advanced cognitive ability. It was, by all accounts, an evolutionary anomaly, or something entirely beyond evolution itself. Meanwhile, Agent Nolan and his team remained stationed outside the maternity wing, their presence a constant reminder of the looming deadline. The tension in the hospital was palpable. Even the staff who hadn't been directly involved in Maria's case whispered about the strange events unfolding behind closed doors. In the early hours of the morning, Tom pulled Elena aside, his voice low but firm. What are the odds we can stop them from taking Eris? Elena hesitated, glancing at the exhausted Maria, who cradled Eris protectively. I'm working on it, Tom. But without concrete evidence that it's not a threat, our hands are tied. The best we can do is try to stall them. Tom clenched his fists. Stalling isn't enough. We need a plan. Maria, overhearing the conversation, spoke up. Maybe we don't need to convince them it's not a threat. Maybe we need to convince them it's valuable. Both Tom and Elena turned to her, surprised by her sudden assertiveness. Maria sat up straighter, her eyes filled with determination. Think about it. They're only interested in taking Eris because they see it as a threat. But what if we prove it's something else? What if we show them it's a breakthrough? A miracle? Elena's brow furrowed. You're suggesting we market it as a scientific or medical advancement? Maria nodded. Exactly. If they see Eris as something worth protecting instead of containing, they might back off. Tom still looked skeptical. And how do we do that in less than a day? Elena paced the room, her mind racing. We'd need to demonstrate its intelligence, its potential. If Eris can show any signs of advanced cognition, problem-solving, communication, it could change how they perceive it. Maria looked down at Eris, who clicked softly, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. He's smart. I know he is. He understands me. Tom raised an eyebrow. How do you know? Maria smiled faintly. It's hard to explain. It's like he feels what I feel. When I'm scared, he gets defensive. When I'm calm, he's calm. It's not just instinct, it's empathy. Elena's eyes widened. If that's true, it's unprecedented. Empathy is a hallmark of advanced intelligence. If we can demonstrate that to the agents, Maria nodded, then they might see him as more than just a creature. The team got to work, setting up a small experiment in the room. They placed a series of objects on a table, a ball, a block, a set of keys, and a photograph of Maria. Elena explained the setup to Maria and Tom. If Eris can identify the photograph as being connected to you, it will demonstrate a level of recognition and attachment that's impossible for most animals. Maria crouched down beside Eris, her voice gentle. "Eris, can you help me? Can you find the picture?" Eris tilted its head, clicking softly. Its eyes scanned the objects on the table before it reached out with one leg, hesitating over the photograph. After a moment, it tapped the photograph twice and clicked louder, as though seeking Maria's approval. Maria beamed. "Good boy, Eris. That's perfect." Elena watched in awe, scribbling notes. "That's incredible. It's not just reacting, it's making a conscious choice." Tom couldn't hide his grin. "Looks like we've got a genius on our hands." The group conducted several more tests, each one further proving Eris's intelligence. It could differentiate colors, follow simple instructions, and even mimic sounds Maria made. By the time the 24-hour deadline approached, Elena felt cautiously optimistic. When Agent Nolan returned, flanked by his team, Maria stood her ground. She cradled Eris protectively, her gaze unwavering. "We have something to show you," Elena announced, stepping forward with her notes. "Before you make any decisions, you need to see what Eris is capable of." Nolan crossed his arms, clearly skeptical. "You have 5 minutes." The group ran through the experiments, each one more impressive than the last. By the end, even Nolan couldn't hide his intrigue. He stared at Eris, who clicked softly, seemingly aware of the attention. Elena delivered her closing argument. "This isn't just an anomaly, it's a breakthrough. Eris represents something we've never seen before, something that could advance our understanding of biology, cognition, and even empathy. Taking him away from Maria would not only be unethical, it would be a waste of potential." Nolan remained silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he turned to his team and nodded. "We'll recommend further observation under controlled conditions, here at the hospital. For now." Maria exhaled in relief, clutching Eris tightly. Tom placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his voice low. "We did it." As Nolan and his team departed, Elena turned to Maria with a small smile. "You just changed the game, Maria. Eris isn't just a creature anymore, he's a symbol of hope." Maria nodded, tears streaming down her face. "He's my miracle." In the days that followed, the hospital transformed into a hub of unprecedented activity. Scientists, medical experts, and even ethicists from around the world arrived to observe Eris. Despite the influx of attention, Maria remained at the center of everything, fiercely protective of the creature she had brought into the world. Eris, for its part, seemed to thrive in Maria's presence, demonstrating behaviors that continued to astonish the experts. Dr. Elena Murray became Maria's closest ally, working tirelessly to ensure that the studies conducted on Eris were ethical and non-invasive. She coordinated with the hospital administration to create a controlled environment that allowed for observation while maintaining Maria and Eris's privacy. Tom took on the role of unofficial guardian, ensuring that no one overstepped their boundaries or treated Maria and Eris as mere subjects of study. One evening, as Maria sat in her hospital room with Eris perched beside her, Dr. Murray entered with a stack of papers. She looked both excited and apprehensive. "What is it?" Maria asked, stroking Eris's smooth, glossy leg. Elena hesitated before speaking. "We've received a proposal. A research institute wants to fund a long-term study of Eris. They're offering a private facility where you can live with him, free from media attention. They've promised full transparency and your involvement in every decision." Maria's brow furrowed. "And if I say no?" Elena sighed. "Then the pressure will only increase. The more the world learns about Eris, the harder it will be to protect him. This could be our best chance to ensure his safety and yours." Maria looked down at Eris, who chirped softly, as if sensing her unease. "I don't want him to be a lab rat, Elena. He's more than that. And that's exactly why this could work," Elena replied gently. "With you by his side, you can make sure he's treated with the respect he deserves. You'd have the final say in everything." Maria bit her lip, considering the offer. I'll need to talk to Tom. Later that night, Maria and Tom discussed the proposal in hushed tones while Eris played with a small toy on the floor. Tom was skeptical at first, worried about the risks of entrusting Eris to an institution, but Maria's resolve eventually won him over. If it means keeping him safe and giving him a chance at a normal life, whatever that looks like for him, I think we should do it, Maria said, her voice firm. Tom nodded reluctantly. Then we'll do it. But I'm coming with you. No way I'm leaving you to handle this alone. The next morning, Maria informed Elena of her decision. Within days, arrangements were made to transfer Maria, Tom, and Eris to the private facility. The move was kept secret, with only a handful of people aware of their destination. The facility, located in a remote area surrounded by lush forests, was nothing like Maria had expected. It was more of a sanctuary than a laboratory, with spacious living quarters and outdoor areas where Eris could roam freely. The staff were carefully selected, each one vetted by Dr. Murray to ensure they shared the same commitment to ethical treatment. As Maria and Tom settled into their new home, they began to see the potential of their new life. Eris adapted quickly to his surroundings, exploring the outdoor enclosure with a mix of curiosity and caution. The staff conducted their studies with care, always seeking Maria's approval before proceeding with any tests. Over time, Eris's abilities continued to astonish everyone. He developed a rudimentary form of communication, using clicks and gestures to express his needs and emotions. He also formed strong bonds with Maria and Tom, often following them around like a loyal companion. Despite the challenges they faced, Maria found herself growing more hopeful about the future. Eris wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. And in his own unique way, he was teaching everyone around him valuable lessons about empathy, resilience, and the beauty of the unknown. One evening, as Maria watched Eris play under the setting sun, she turned to Tom with a smile. "You know, I used to think my life was over when I found out I was pregnant. But now, I feel like it's just beginning." Tom nodded, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You're right. This is just the start of something incredible." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the sanctuary, Maria felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. For the first time, she truly believed that she and Eris were exactly where they were meant to be. As the weeks turned into months, Maria and Eris's story became a global phenomenon. Despite their secluded location, news of their extraordinary journey continued to ripple across the world, inspiring countless debates about biology, ethics, and the mysteries of life. Maria had initially feared the spotlight, but as she saw the impact her story was having, she began to see it as an opportunity to advocate not just for Eris, but for the many people who felt out of place in the world. One day, Maria received a letter that would change everything. It was from a renowned filmmaker offering to create a documentary about her life with Eris. Unlike the sensationalized media coverage they'd been avoiding, the filmmaker promised to tell their story with honesty and compassion. Maria was hesitant at first, worried about exposing Eris to more scrutiny, but Tom encouraged her to consider it. "This could be a way to show the world who he really is," Tom said as they walked together in the sanctuary's gardens, Eris scuttling alongside them. "On our terms?" Maria nodded, her hand brushing against Eris's smooth exoskeleton. "But only if it's done right. I won't let anyone exploit him." After weeks of careful discussions, Maria agreed to the project. The filmmaker, a kind and passionate woman named Sophia, arrived at the sanctuary with a small crew and an open mind. Over the next year, Sophia documented Maria's life with Eris, capturing moments of joy, frustration, and discovery. She interviewed the researchers, the sanctuary staff, and even Maria's family, piecing together a story that was as much about love and resilience as it was about the extraordinary creature at its heart. As the documentary took shape, Maria found herself reflecting on how far she'd come. She remembered the fear and isolation she'd felt when she first learned about her pregnancy, the pain of being judged and doubted, and the strength she'd discovered in herself as she fought for Eris. It was a journey she hadn't chosen, but one she was proud to have embraced. The day the documentary premiered, Maria was a bundle of nerves. A private screening was held at the sanctuary, attended by the researchers, the staff, and a few close friends. As the lights dimmed and the film began, Maria held her breath, unsure of what to expect. What unfolded on the screen was a beautiful, heartfelt portrayal of her life with Eris. Sophia had captured their bond in a way that was both intimate and universal, showing not just the challenges they'd faced, but the love and determination that had carried them through. By the time the credits rolled, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The documentary was released to the public soon after, and the response was overwhelming. People from all walks of life reached out to Maria, sharing stories of how her journey had inspired them to embrace their own challenges and celebrate their unique paths. Schools and universities invited her to speak, not just about Eris, but about resilience, acceptance, and the power of love. Through it all, Maria remained grounded, her focus always on Eris. The sanctuary became a haven not just for him, but for other creatures and people who didn't quite fit into the world's expectations. Maria worked closely with Dr. Murray and the staff to expand their mission, advocating for better understanding and care for all living beings. One sunny afternoon, as Maria sat on the porch of their home within the sanctuary, Eris by her side, Tom joined her with a cup of tea. He handed her a letter that had just arrived. "What's this?" Maria asked, opening the envelope. "It's from the United Nations," Tom said with a grin. "They're inviting you to speak at their next conference on biodiversity and ethics." Maria's eyes widened. "Me? At the UN? You've already shown the world what's possible when we embrace the unknown," Tom said, his voice full of pride. "This is just the next step." Maria looked down at Eris, who was playing with a small toy in the grass. She thought about everything they'd been through, the fears they'd faced, and the lives they'd touched. Taking a deep breath, she smiled. "Let's do it," she said. And as the sun set over the sanctuary, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Maria felt a deep sense of purpose. Her journey with Eris was far from over. It was only just beginning. Together, they would continue to challenge the world's expectations, proving that even in the face of the extraordinary, love and acceptance could create a brighter future for all. Continuing from where we left off, here is the final segment of the story. The doctors in the room were frozen in disbelief as the massive spider crouched protectively over its mother. The air felt thick with an eerie, otherworldly presence, and no one dared move. The creature's sleek, obsidian body gleamed under the fluorescent lights, its 8 legs spread wide, ready to strike at any perceived threat. The mother, Emily, reached out a trembling hand toward the spider. To everyone's astonishment, the spider gently lowered its head, as if recognizing her. Emily's face softened, a maternal instinct taking over. She whispered, "You're mine, aren't you?" The creature let out a low, vibrating sound that seemed to echo not just in the room but deep within the souls of everyone present. It was a hum of acknowledgement, of connection. Emily turned her gaze toward the stunned medical team, her voice calm but firm. "He's not a threat." The lead doctor, Dr. Mason, struggled to find words. "Emily, this defies everything we know about biology, about life itself. This is unprecedented. It's dangerous." "Dangerous?" Emily's voice grew sharp. "He's a living being, just like any other child born in this hospital. You think he doesn't deserve to live because he's different?" The tension in the room was palpable. The other doctors exchanged nervous glances, unsure of how to respond. The creature, sensing the unease, raised its body slightly, its massive fangs glinting menacingly. But Emily placed a hand on its back, and it immediately relaxed, as though soothed by her touch. "I won't let anyone hurt him," she declared, her voice steady despite the fear that lingered in her heart. "He's mine and I'll protect him." Outside the room, news of the bizarre birth had spread like wildfire. Reporters and curious onlookers crowded the hospital corridors, desperate for a glimpse of the so-called monsters that had been born. Security guards struggled to maintain order as camera flashes lit up the hallway. Inside, Emily and the doctors were confronted with an impossible decision. Dr. Mason finally spoke, his voice tinged with resignation. "Emily, if you're determined to keep him, we need to ensure he won't harm anyone. We need to understand him." "Understand him?" Emily challenged. "How about treating him like a newborn instead of a specimen?" But deep down, even Emily knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. How could she raise a creature so unlike anything the world had ever seen? Would society ever accept him? Could she provide the care he needed? Her mind raced with questions, but her resolve remained firm. Suddenly, the door to the room burst open. A team of scientists in hazmat suits entered, led by a stern-looking man with an authoritative presence. "I'm Dr. Harrington from the Department of Anomalous Studies," he announced. "We're taking custody of the specimen for research purposes." "Specimen?" Emily's voice was a low growl. She stepped in front of the spider, shielding it with her body. "This is my child. You're not taking him anywhere." Dr. Harrington's gaze hardened. "Ma'am, this is not a child. It's a biohazard. We have protocols for situations like this." Emily squared her shoulders, her protective instincts overriding her fear. "You'll have to go through me." The spider, as if understanding the threat, rose to its full height, its legs spanning nearly the entire room. It emitted a chilling hiss, causing the scientists to stumble back in fear. Dr. Mason intervened, raising a hand to calm both sides. "Everyone stop. This isn't the way to handle this." He turned to Dr. Harrington. "You can't just take him away. He was born here, under our care. We have a responsibility to both mother and child." Dr. Harrington's jaw tightened, but he seemed to consider the argument. After a tense pause, he said, "Fine. But we'll be monitoring this situation closely. If there's any sign of danger, we will intervene." With that, the scientists retreated, leaving the room in an uneasy silence. Emily collapsed onto the hospital bed, her body shaking from the adrenaline. The spider curled up at her feet, its massive frame oddly delicate as it sought comfort near its mother. Over the next few days, the hospital became a fortress. Security was tightened, and a media frenzy erupted. The world was captivated by the story of Emily and her spider child. Opinions were sharply divided. Some hailed it as a miracle, others as an abomination. Emily, however, remained steadfast. She named the spider Arak, a nod to its unique nature. She spent hours studying its behavior, learning its needs, and building a bond that defied logic. Arak, in turn, seemed fiercely loyal to her, never straying far from her side. One day, as Emily sat by the hospital window with Arak perched beside her, she whispered, "The world may never understand you, but I will. You're my miracle, and together, we'll face whatever comes." As she spoke, Arak let out a soft hum, a sound that resonated with a sense of belonging. It was a moment of pure connection, a reminder that love could transcend even the most unimaginable circumstances. The world outside remained chaotic, but within that room, a mother and her extraordinary child found peace. And as they looked out at the horizon, they knew their journey was just beginning. Together, they would navigate a world that wasn't ready for them, proving that even in the face of fear and uncertainty, love could prevail.